Okay, today on the SpeechGoods podcast, we have a very, very special treat. We have a guest. His name is Dr. Shehab Faragallah. He's actually one of the co-inventors and co-founders of Myo Spots. If you are not familiar with Myo Spots, it's actually us in the speech therapy world would think of it as like a tactile cue to help kids, adults, anyone who is working in a myofunctional therapy program, working on bettering their oral rest posture and getting the tongue to the top of the palate. If what I'm saying to you is like way over your head, listen to the episode because you're going to learn more about that in the episode. It was super interesting. But anyways, super good conversation today. So Dr. Shehab Faragallah is a dentist and a previous business owner of a dental practice on the Gold Coast for 10 years. He's been working at Gold Coast Holistic Dental Care since 2017. Dr. Faragallah practiced all facets of the field, including cosmetic, general, pediatric, restorative, orthodontic, and surgical dentistry, with a special interest in oral myology. So let me just keep it real with you. Now that I've read Dr. Shehab's bio, we were originally wanting the other co-founder of Myo Spots to be on the show with us, but unfortunately they were unable to make it. But I did want to make sure that I read his bio to you as well, so that you had a good idea of who this individual is that we're talking about whenever Dr. Shehab refers to his business partner. So even though this person was not here for the interview, 100% here in spirit. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know who that is too. So Dr. Ibrahim Aldib is a B.Pharm and PhD degree in biomolecular sciences. He has extensive experience in drug discovery and medicinal chemistry research, demonstrated by a long list of high-quality research papers and several patents. He worked as a researcher at various universities and research institutes around the world. So clearly we have a pretty cool team right now. Hello, friend. Okay, so let's talk about this conversation that I have with Dr. Shehab because it's just bomb. So this is actually an interview that is very much a first on the SpeechGoods podcast. If you've been listening to the podcast at all, a lot of the guests that I have on here are some amazing kick butt doing the dang thing SLPs, and I've also finally gotten the opportunity to have some OTs on the podcast, and this is actually going to be our first guest that is not a therapist. So as you read in his bio, Dr. Shehab is actually a holistic dentist. But holistic dentistry is just like all up in my feels and my heart because if you didn't know already, I absolutely love myofunctional therapy. And we actually talk a little bit about some of the nitty gritty of myofunctional therapy in the episode. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely 100% stay tuned. Don't go away. Anyways, not only do we get into a little bit about myofunctional therapy, we talk about a product that he's actually put out called Myo Spots. This is something that I myself use in the myofunctional therapy room. But we also delve a little bit deeper and we actually start having these great conversations about mindset and making that shift, that oh so interesting shift that some of us are making from clinician or doing only clinic and clinician type work and shifting that to a business mindset and even maybe a business outside of providing direct patient care or something like a private practice. And he gives us some great insight into that. We actually even talk about how he was able to start his company with his business partner and some things that they had to do. He talks about making his vision statement, just a lot of really great things. The reason I made this podcast is to hear people's stories. Instead of me sitting here barking at you, telling you what you need to do, I love it when we get to hear the stories of just freaking awesome people doing the dang thing. We also have a really good conversation, and I kind of like put him a little bit in a corner. He was so sweet about it, and I asked him a very direct question about his beliefs on money and financial rewards when in healthcare professions, especially helping people professions. And he just gave, like, I literally was typing the whole time because I wanted to just quote him. I told him he needs to write a book. He was just such a thoughtful and insightful individual, and it was an absolute pleasure. And I think you are going, no matter who you are, no matter what stage in your career you're in, you're going to get a lot of value out of this interview. So don't go away. I promise I'm going to stop talking now. All right, let's go do this thing. Hello, hello, hello. How are you doing today?
Good. Very well. Thanks, Danny, for inviting me on.
Yes. So everybody who is listening and watching out there, we are on like totally different time schedules. It is 7:30 in the morning for me and 10:30 at night. So over in your time zone. So we're gonna do this thing, and I'm hyped up on my coffee, and you're probably ready for bed, right?
Yeah. Yes, that sounds about right. But look, I'm happy to do this at any time.
Yes, yes. So, super excited to be able to interview you today. You and it's your business partner is Ibrahim, right?
Yeah, so co-inventor and business partner. So
Ooh,
yeah,
I like that
yeah,
co-inventor.
yeah.
That's good. Perfect. So, so sad that Ibrahim was not able to be here, but we are just going to roll with it. And you actually, I'm so excited to interview you because I feel like a lot of us out there and a lot of the listeners on the show are speech pathologists, but I feel like it's good for us to see sort of these commonalities across fields, especially in these sort of like sister fields like dentistry, which myself, I do myofunctional therapy. I work with dentists all the time. I have used your product, Myo Spots, which is fabulous. And we're going to talk about that as well. And I just love the fact that you've taken sort of you got your traditional dental training and then you also went this holistic route, and then on top of going in sort of a non-traditional route in your regular career, you also decided to open up a product based business, which is super super cool. So can you just tell us a little bit about what makes, I kind of gave a little bit of away, but I'm going to let you talk about it now. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes you and just your career journey as a dentist, as a holistic dentist, and now as a business owner unique?
Yeah, I would have to say that when I first started dentistry, um, I found it very difficult to find a path where things were integrative. So we were very focused in the mouth and would ignore what's going on in the rest of the body. And the more I learned, the more I realized that things are a lot more connected. So there was one instance I think that was an eye opener for me. I had this one patient who came in and asked me to replace his amalgam fillings. And he said, "Look, just make sure that you do it safely." And I was, how safe do you want me to be able to do it? I can put a rubber dam over here, and I can use some, some suction to make sure you don't swallow it. And then later on, he introduced me to different ways that he thought were good in order to minimize toxicity. And I took that away and I said, well, is it really unsafe or is it not safe? And I read a lot more and I met a lot more people. And then that got me into the idea that, well, we what we put in our mouth can actually be toxic to our bodies. And in addition to that, I then started to realize that there are a lot of connections with the body, especially the mouth and the rest of the body. And there was one patient that came in and he needed a tooth taken out. And I remember this strange incident that he spoke about afterwards. He said, Shehab, what happened after you took out this tooth? He had a swelling in his groin that was there for about 20 years. And after taking out this tooth, that swelling disappeared within a few days. And I thought, how does that make sense? How do you make sense of that? It doesn't, to me, the mouth is over here. The lymphatics in the groin are a long way away. How does that connect? So I realized that the body is not, you cannot look at the body in isolation and things need to be looked at together. And then I met some amazing people who mentored me and showed me different things about holistic dentistry. And that's when I started to move into temporomandibular joint dysfunction and oral myology. And that's where I found the space of oral myology and early interceptive orthodontic treatment. So that's where my path took me initially. In the business area, I did have a practice a while ago, but I wasn't really fulfilled because I wasn't really a holistic dentist at that point in time. And then when I left that and I started to explore what I did like, that's where I ended up where I am now. So that's a summary of my path.
Oh, I love that. So are you in a holistic dentist practice, or are you practicing as a holistic dentist now, or are you just focused on Myo Spots right now?
Well, no, I work at a holistic dental practice, and primarily most of my patients are children. And where we get in there, they may have, for instance, breathing issues, or they may have poor tongue posture or whatever. But there are some patients that come in, and this is a growing number, and I haven't actually tried to advertise this at all, but they somehow work out that, okay, this dentist over here treats this particular issue. And they are those patients who have sleep disturbances or sleep issues, and they become a little bit disheartened in the options that are out there. For instance, if they're severe, they may be told that they need to get a CPAP machine. And some patients don't like CPAP machines because of the idea of having to put a mask over your face. And they feel, and some patients are like, well, this is not really treating me. I'm not getting better because I'm so reliant on this machine that my body's not functioning the way it should. And there are other patients that they can't wear the mandibular advancement splint, which is something to bring their jaw forward. And so they end up finding me, and I put them through a program that I've sort of, well, pieced together over the years. And most of them get better. At least they get a significant improvement. And so they're the types of patients I treat at the moment. And I work in a clinic that has multiple practitioners, and they're all kind of similar minded as myself.
I love that. So you're actually working with other professionals like within the clinic that you're at. So it's not just dentists there.
Yeah, so we do have a chiropractor and a naturopath, an acupuncturist, and we also have got, like, different kind of infrared saunas and like magnesium salt baths and things like that. So we try to sort of piece it all together. We really do. We're almost going to get a holistic GP as well, to a general practitioner, so that we can then piece it all together. So the idea is that when they come to see us, if they need any of the alternative treatments, it's offered to them there as well. It's not my practice. I'm really happy at the moment where I am to not be running a practice. But it's a really good place to work, and I love it.
That is awesome. Like, do y'all want to come to Louisiana?
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't been to the United. I'd love to go there sooner or later, but you don't have holistic practitioners there.
We have some. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
being
yeah.
silly.
I know.
We do have some
Yeah,
absolutely amazing practitioners
yeah,
here, but
yeah,
as some of the challenges can be getting that, finding that team. And for anyone else out there who's interested in myofunctional therapy, just like you said, we don't look at the body in isolation. Like, although, when I'm doing myofunctional therapy, I'm looking at the mouth and I'm looking at oral function. I'm also looking at a lot of other things. Even if it's not something that I'm going to treat in my room, I'm looking at the whole body. I refer to PT, chiropractors all the time. I refer
yeah.
to
Good.
ENTs all the time, because you're 100% right. I mean, especially when you start looking at airway issues, if the child can't breathe, that does not just affect their
Yeah,
mouth, like, obviously, right?
yeah, yeah. 100%. I mean, it's everything from their attention to their growth, to their intelligence, even to their even how often they get sick. It's all interconnected to breathing. And like you said, looking at the body in one complete piece is really important. I mean, sometimes you end up getting correlations between your different planes of symmetry, like your shoulders and hips, and asymmetry in the face, or temporal mandibular joint dysfunction. And if you're not keeping an eye out for that, you might oversee something that's really obvious that could really help someone. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to treat it yourself. Referring is sometimes the best thing you could do, and the patients appreciate that. So, yeah,
100%. Okay, I have a question for you. Since you are in a different field,
yeah,
obviously, than I
yeah,
am,
yeah,
so there's very much this culture within speech therapy, especially, and I don't know if this is an international thing. I can tell you it is very much in the United States, of like this feeling that you have to do it all, that you have to treat everything, that every kid that comes in your room, you have to figure out what it is that's going on with them and fix it. And there's sometimes this, like, it's not a hesitancy to refer out by any means. It's more like it's more like almost like if I can't fix it, I feel like a failure. But being in myofunctional therapy has just completely squashed that, because there's no kid that comes to me for myo that isn't also seeing another professional, like ever. How do you feel that is do you feel that, is it that same way in dentistry or like more traditional dentistry? Obviously you're not, in that setting right now, clearly, but.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%, especially new graduates who come out straight out of dental school and they feel that it's incumbent upon themselves to be able to fix whatever problem is there. And if they don't fix that problem, then they feel as though they're failing. And I totally agree with that. And it's a problem because you can only do what you can do. And if you try to do something above your level of experience or expertise, then you're bound to run into issues, right? So, referring to somebody who's more capable at a particular thing is not a shame at all. Actually, it's the best thing you could do for a patient. So if you, I mean, I regularly refer, to ENT surgeons, for instance, if like I run into airway issues, if I can't, if sometimes you try to make those adenoids shrink by different breathing techniques and it works, but sometimes you hit a wall and it does not work. And in the time that you're trying to retrain a child to rebreathe, that may take a lot of precious time away from natural growth and development, that sometimes surgery is a good option because you have to weigh the risk benefit for that child, and they may then develop and grow in that period of time that you're trying to get something to work and it doesn't. So referring is really important, and I think sometimes the practitioner just has to know, just know yourself, know what your limitations are, and then also understand that, okay, if you work in a place where there's other practitioners, ask. There's no shame in asking, what do you think about this? And if you're on your own, it's good to have people that in other practices where you can pick up the phone and say, look, this is where I have been trying to treat and I haven't been having much success. What do you think? And if somebody's really looking out for you, they'll say, look, try this, that, or the other. If you fail there, refer to this person. And that's what you do. And that's what you got to do. But if you don't, then really at the end of that, your primary focus has to be the patient. And the ego within the self has to be secondary to the healthcare of that patient. And that's really important. And it's not just in America, it's everywhere. Like a lot of practitioners have this same issue as well.
Like, I just want to listen to that over and over again. Because it's so insightful. And I think it's encouraging for, again, like this is a lot of the listeners on this podcast are SLPs. There's a few OTs and PTs, but I think it's really important to see that like there's a lot of things that aren't SLP specific, that this is just like a human thing. And I think it's good for us to see, like you have a DDS that's considered a terminal degree, correct? Like the highest that you could get in that field, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can specialize after that in various branches, but pretty much, yeah. Like, but obviously you can do like master's degree after that. Okay. And you can then specialize to become an orthodontist or whatever else afterwards. So there are, but I mean, I would say like the mother degree, just like if you were a medical practitioner, it'd be the mother degree. And then after that, you can specialize and become, a knee surgeon, for instance, or something like that. But yeah, it is like pretty much the umbrella sort of, you've got to go through there to get to.
Right. And I think that's good to know, like that, a lot of us, like as speech pathologists, we have master's degrees, and you can go on to pursue like a PhD or something like that. Right, but I think it's good to see, like, even in this like doctorate level profession, there's still things that you have to learn. There's still things that you don't know. There's still times where despite like all this education that you've had, you have to humble yourself and just be like, okay, and be honest with your patient and tell them, I'm not sure. I'm going to refer you to someone who does know.
Right.
And I think that's just part of like the human experience.
Yeah.
It's good to
Yeah.
remind ourselves of that, you know?
I mean, you're dealing with the human body as well, and the human body is the most sophisticated machine that we know of. And you know, you think of a car, for instance. You've got um, at the top levels, you've got your engineers, and then down further, you got your mechanics. But you don't have a mechanic just for one part. They're for different things. You'll need an electrical mechanic. You'll need somebody who does your wheels or whatever. But the human body is far more sophisticated than any machine we know. Like take the foot, for instance. All the little intrinsic muscles in the foot makes it so much more complicated and sophisticated than the best four-wheel drive car you know of, which just goes straight left, right. So, we can walk that way, that way, that way, that way, and up hills. We can climb mountains and all that kind of thing. So for us to say that we know it all just because we went to university and did a few degrees, um, I think that we're going to be continuing to learn forever because there are so many mysteries about the body. And the more we work with one another, the better, because everything is so interrelated. So, as I was saying before, the mouth connects to so many parts of the rest of the body. And the more we learn, the more we realize, okay, I need an expert that can tell me how, for instance, the shoulder is connecting to the right temporomandibular joint or something like that, where I know that there may be some kind of interconnection. And this is a good point. When I generally, whenever I do any myofunctional therapy, I usually try to refer to some kind of physical therapist. I sometimes I don't know who to refer to. So sometimes, for instance, I'll ask them, do you see someone regularly for physical therapy? Because if, for instance, their maxilla widens, then there's probably some sutures in their head that's moving, right? And if those sutures are moving, and it's quite possible that all of a sudden muscles in the neck are starting to stabilize the vertebrae. And if that happens, then it's quite possible that the hips might start to get activated when they weren't. So if that's happening, then it would be wise to have a physical therapist of some sort, whether he's a physiotherapist or a chiro or whatever, somebody that can oversee what's happening with the rest of the body so that we work together, not just fix this over here, because it's the domino all the way down to the toes. So yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. And like and by the way, if you're listening and you weren't interested in myofunctional therapy before this episode, you're probably going to be interested after this episode. Because yes, I think like for our brains to make sense of things, I think we like to put things in boxes and put things in pockets and put things in categories. Okay, you work on this. There's even a joke in the SLP world, like, okay, I do neck up. Like that's all. And I've even made that joke before, like neck up, I got this. Neck down, you need to go see an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. But I think that actually limits us. It's a way, I understand we operate that way as a way to help us understand things, and to be able to learn and just conceptualize anything. But we also need to recognize like how limiting that can be. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the reason that we show up and we get up and go to the office every morning, it's not for us. We're doing that for our patients. And so just thinking like even kind of getting past like our own limiting beliefs about how we practice or, how we're going to be perceived by patients or other people in our field, and really just advocating for what we believe is right for our patients. And and I do want to ask you this. So on that note, especially because you were trained in traditional dentistry and then you went the holistic route. I know you said that obviously you became interested in it. It just made sense. You had some people that were kind of supporting you throughout that journey. Did you ever get any sort of pushback from colleagues or any sort of like, why are you doing that? This is not what we were trained to do.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yes, yeah, in short, yes. Like the short answer is yes, we did. But the interesting thing is, those who were opposed to it, often they weren't really well read or versed in terms of the research out there, because there's an abundance of research, and you just have to go into any kind of like database and you'll see the amount of research to support, for example, myofunctional therapy, for instance. Or, I mean, if it was like mercury toxicity or exposure, there really is quite a lot of evidence, and it's not something that you just sort of, it's left to the hippies to do alternative stuff. Do you know what I mean? So it's actually quite, and it surprises me that when people or professionals turn around and say, okay, look, this doesn't make sense, there's no research. And I wonder, how do you make such statements? Have you looked to see what research is out there? And I've had that quite a lot. But the interesting thing is the ones that have actually supported our journey anyway are the ones that are most qualified. So we find certain people in certain positions. Just recently, Dr. Rafi from the Israeli Orthodontic Association, he's the used to be the head of the Israeli Orthodontic Association, has written a paper about myofunctional therapy and how Myospots assists in closing anterior open bite. And so those guys that are like really up there, they're the ones that tend to, I feel they're more wise, the ones that have done a lot of research, but it's the general practitioners that we tend to get. Not all of them, by the way. I don't want to be unfair. There's a lot of people out there that tend to be very open-minded, but yes, definitely a lot out there that say, oh, what is this stuff that you're doing? Doesn't make sense. And recently I've had a patient of mine who I recognized immediately. She's a prominent surgeon here in Australia, and she doesn't know that I know that she's a surgeon. She didn't even write down on a medical form. So so then what happened is that I brought her in and I was treating her for sleep issues. And when I did that, I later told her, oh, well, I know who you are and you're such and such. And she goes, you can call me by my first name. But what was interesting to me is that she was a very traditional practitioner, but coming to the practice for an alternative way of treating sleep and tooth grinding and things like that, which was, to me, that was really good.
Right. And then I think that's the best way to get buy-in is, not everybody's going to be willing to participate or whatever, but that's the best way to get buy-in from people is like to show them and to let them, and sorry about that, and to let them sort of participate in it. That was how I got into myofunctional therapy. I had a kid, which this is very common in the speech therapy space, that you'll have kids in therapy for years for like the same sound. Like there's absolutely no reason a child should be in speech therapy working on S&Z for 2 years. Like that's absolutely absurd. Yet we've kind of normalized that, just like, oh, well, he's just not going to get it. Or, oh, I'm just not a good enough therapist. And it's like, well, actually, no, why don't we actually take a look at why this is going on? And that's how I found myofunctional therapy. There's a physical therapist who does myofunctional therapy in my area. And I found out about her. And actually this child had started seeing her and finally started making progress in his speech. And he still needed some of that traditional stuff. Showing him where to put his tongue, things like that, practicing it, habituating the sound into conversational speech, but he didn't have access to the movement. Like, and it was just like, kind of like what you said. It was just like, duh. Duh.
So was that because the muscles became strengthened and they learned to move in those positions where they normally didn't move, and then all of a sudden the sounds just started to pop up as a result? Is that what happened?
Yes, exactly. And he's still like, and I never want to poo-poo traditional practice or anything like that. That was still part of it, but it did not, we were actually making a progress there. And that's where I was like, I gotta learn I got to learn about it. Actually, when I did my myofunctional therapy course, that's where I saw they actually brought some Myo Spots
Really?
to the course, which is really that's why it's so cool to speak with you now. And I do want to kind of let you kind of tell the audience a little bit about like what are Myo Spots? Like, what's this business that you've created?
Well, my spots came out of I was in a course one day, and we were doing a lot of like my functional therapy, and they use all these different tools to try and get the tongue to raise up to the roof of the mouth. Amongst them, they had other dissolvable things that I looked into, and I wasn't quite sure what they were. I am Muslim, and I know that I can't have pork as part of the diet. And there were others that were vegans, and there were others that were kosher, and there was others that were. And I'm like, what's in this stuff? I'm not putting this stuff in my mouth. And I looked at it, and they didn't give us the list of ingredients. And I'm very inquisitive when it comes to that kind of. I want to know what I'm putting in my mouth, right? So I wanted to be able to offer something to my patients. And when I emailed a lot of these people, they said, look, we do not recommend them for internal use inside your mouth. And in addition to that, the majority of it is porcine, which is pork. So I then teamed up with Ibrahim, and I said, listen, I want to be able to offer my patients something that's safe and specifically designed for this. And the reason I approached Ibrahim is because Ibrahim is he's like a Bachelor of Pharmacy, and he's got a PhD in drug discovery and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, we're friends, but maybe we can work together. And he said, okay, let's do this. And it could have been over 15 or 20 prototypes, but the first prototype, I thought, wow, this is actually working. He actually made it in his lab, and I thought, wow, we're on the right track here. And then probably about 20 times later, we ended up finding something that was working. But then I guess to answer your question, the business part came, I think, secondary to a passion and a love for wanting to do something good, right? And then we thought, well, it makes sense to turn it into a business, monetize it, and do something we like doing, right? And so that's how it all sort of happened. That's how it all started, and that's how it grew from there. Ibrahim and I probably are not the most experienced when it comes to like a global type of business. We've all done our own sort of little businesses. Like I've had a dental practice before and things like that. But so we've learned a lot on the way, and so far it's been a great fun journey. And so that's how Myospots sort of came about.
And then y'all have how many flavors do y'all have? This is the silliest question, but I gotta know. I don't remember.
Yeah. So there's officially 3, but unofficially there's 4. So the reason there was 4 is because we originally started off with passion fruit, and that was the prototype, and that was where we started off. But then we introduced strawberry, banana, and blueberry. And the most popular is the strawberry, actually. So the reason we put flavors in there is, again, to try and entice, especially children, to look forward to using something in their mouth and subconsciously get them to train for tongue elevation while enjoying, maybe to a certain extent, that they have something flavored in their mouth. And so a lot of the children don't even realize that they're even using it. They've got it in their mouth, they're getting the training, and it's unconscious. And that's what we wanted to try and get. It's what I really wanted to get. I wanted to be able to create, because I found it very difficult to create some exercises for habitual tongue elevation. It was really difficult to get compliance. I don't know how it is in your practice, but getting a child to have 24-hour tongue elevation is a difficult thing to do. So if they're doing like, an hour and a half to 2 hours without trying, it becomes an unconscious habit. And if it's an unconscious habit, then I feel that you can create memory. And it's kind of like, posture. After a while, you do it enough times, your posture kind of becomes good. So, yeah.
Yes. And so for listeners out there who are a little unfamiliar with myofunctional therapy, one of the big one of the big goals of myofunctional therapy is appropriate oral rest posture. So when you're just sitting there at rest, watching TV or whatever, your lips should be closed. You should be breathing through your nose, and your tongue should actually be lightly suctioned to the top of your palate. That's one of the things that we work on training with myofunctional therapy, and he's 100% correct. So if we're trying to habituate something, and you use that word unconscious, that's perfect. We want them to be doing that all the time. And so the Myo spots are something we can actually put it right. We put it like right on the alveolar ridge. And it's like a little reminder for them. It's a tactile cue, a reminder for them to keep their tongue up there. And then they begin to dissolve. And then the longer that they keep their tongue up there, the faster it actually dissolves typically. And I just love, and this is something I really encourage within SLPs as well. I love it when the people making the products, the physical products for these industries or therapies or whatever, are the people that are actually in the trenches or have been in the trenches using them. Because that's when, first of all, I like the idea that when I'm paying for a product, that it's not just going to some like guy who paid way too much money for his MBA degree and at Harvard or whatever. I like the fact that it's going to someone who knows what I'm trying to accomplish. And then it also ends up helping you create a better product. But I think a lot of us in these sort of like healthcare fields, we're not, and you said it too, like, we've never done this big business or whatever, but I mean, you just went for it, right? We need to be the ones, why shouldn't we be the ones creating the products? Why shouldn't we be the ones helping our patients? And why shouldn't we be the ones getting the monetary benefit? Because if we don't make it, somebody else is going to make it. And it might be someone who's like not even in the field and doesn't recognize, like you recognize that the flavors is a really, really big deal. Like my kids love that it's flavored. The product I used to use, I still have it. The product I used to use, it was like literally, if you're watching this on video, you can see my face. Every time I would like take it out and let them like use it and play with it, they give me this like face. Let's not talk about trying to get it on the roof of mouth of a 4-year-old, by the way. But I love that. So you created this product. Can you tell us a little bit about I know you told us a little bit about the why, and like actually, you realized there was a gap in the market, you filled that gap. And I love how, like, again, you personally, you do not consume pork. And I did not know that some of that stuff had pork. I need to go look at my supplies.
Yeah. Well, it took a long time to get them to respond. So I had to email them a few times. I'm like, does this have these? What are the ingredients? And they finally sent me an email. I still have a copy of the email saying, look, this is what it is. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Oh, wow. And that's really important. And you can really damage a client relationship if that client does not eat pork for, religious reasons or any other reasons, and you gave them something with pork. Like,
right. And even if they're vegan or vegetarian or any of those, or for whatever reason, there should be like an informed consent. People should know what they're having in their mouths.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. You just blew my mind. I forgot. I need to go back to what my question was going to be. Oh yes. So how did you finally make the decision? And can you talk to us about that transition from like clinician practitioner, which you were still doing those things, but that transition from clinician practitioner to actually like having a product-based business? Like how was that shift for you? Like your mindset, everything.
Well, that's a really good question because, through the process, I don't think it was ever intended to become like a global kind of business right at the start. The initial intent was, okay, let's get something, and I know that I'd be able to use it, and in addition to that, we'd be able to get like, I'm sure a lot of customers in Australia would purchase it as well. But the we then found that it became really it was really popular globally, and I mean some of our biggest customers are in the US and in Europe at the moment, and we're like, well, okay, this thing is actually in need in so many places around the world. So I guess what we did, the transition is we remain to be practitioners and Ibrahim scientists as we speak, so that we could actually fund this through our jobs and continue working. And it was more like, okay, let's do this. We'll put our 100% effort in there, but we couldn't completely leave our job to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make a living at the same time. But in addition to that, we never intended to completely leave our jobs because I still love what I do. So I wanted to sort of do something personally to still work as a holistic dentist, but probably not full time. It would probably be a few days a week or something like that. And also do this as this grows, then I'll be able to cut down to two days ideally. The transition in terms of becoming like a business, I think it was organic. What happened was that we realized, okay, we initially went to a number of symposiums and got really good response, and we thought, well, we had to make that decision to invest quite a lot of money that we didn't have, and so um, we had the same mindset. And I know he's not here speaking, but we both are on the same wavelength. We're like, there was no hesitation. I had no hesitation. He had no hesitation. And I think we understood that it's quite possible to invest quite a lot of money and lose it all. But for us, it was worth it because if you lose it, you lose the money, fair enough, and you're going to have to pay it back one day. But the um, the other alternative is that you do well and you can combine two or three things, and that is, a passion for what you want to do, um, helping a lot of people that cannot be helped, because I see people in public every day that I wish I could pull them aside and say, look, close your mouth, breathe through your nose, put your tongue out through your mouth. I wish I could do that. I wish I could go there, grab them and do that. And make it financially rewarding so that it's sustainable. Because if it's not financially rewarding, it's not sustainable. So that was, I guess, the moment where we said, okay, we created a vision and we put that vision together and we wrote it down on paper and said, this is our vision. And we want to try and make Myo Spots accessible and knowable to every country around the world. And that's what we want. That was our vision in order to do that, so that we could be able to treat people without having to be there. So because if you think about it, like there are some people that don't have access to myofunctional therapy. Some people can't afford braces and things like that. But if you got them at 3 or 4 years old to start, now I'm not saying in any way that MyoSpots is the answer. But I am saying that it is part of a solution that can help people. Just by using them, they can educate themselves by going, oh, what does this do? What am I supposed to do? Why am I putting my tongue up here? So that was the vision statement that we sort of came up with to try and make it accessible in all places around the globe, so that everybody can use it. And then when it got serious is when we started to take heaps of loans out, and we took out one lender. We got a certain amount of money from one lender, and then we went to probably about 5 or 6 lenders, and we got parcels of money from everywhere and put it all together to develop the product. Because what we didn't want to do was to make it in a food sort of place, like a food factory. We wanted to make it in a top grade pharmaceutical company, so that every spot that comes out is weighed it's perfect and behaves exactly the same, and it's in, and as the pharmaceutical companies' quality standards. So it's not a medicine, but it's produced by medicine companies, and that's why we teamed up with a group in Switzerland to do that for us. And so, yeah, I guess that gives you an idea of our transition from being practitioners to business people / practitioners.
I didn't, a lot of that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that it was like created in a more like pharmaceutical factory versus food factory. But I think that just goes again to show why I love it when the practitioners are the ones making the products. Like, I know I said that earlier, but I
Yeah.
think it just goes back to that again. And I think a lot of us as practitioners, we were trained to be in clinic. We were trained to treat patients. And I know sometimes it's hard for us to imagine ourselves like outside of that. But the thing is, like, obviously, if you have that desire, not everybody needs to go make a product or a business or whatever, but if you have that desire, what we put out is going to be so much better than what some Joe Schmo puts out who doesn't know anything about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And to that point is because, you want to make sure, like, part of the motivation is to make it accessible, usable, and be able to help the masses. That's part of the motivation. If your motivation is purely monetary and that's it, then you're going to cut corners. And the ironic thing is, like, if you're purely monetary, you don't make as much money. It's a very ironic kind of thing, because if your motivation is not just that, then you tend to do things that are more sustainable and higher quality, and you tend to reinvest a lot back into what you're doing to perfect it and get it better and better and better and better. So that's definitely, I do agree with you, because if you do give it to anybody else who's with different motivations, it should stay within, like, as much as possible within the industry. And the great thing about myofunctional therapy is that there are a lot of practitioners that are making products, which is great. Like the ones who make Myo Munchie as well, they're here in Australia. So yeah, so they're practitioners as well. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna ask you a question because I really want your thoughts on this. And I always tell my audience, like, I keep it real on this podcast. I can't stand fluffy junk talk. Like, I want to talk about real stuff. So, is it okay if I ask you this question?
Yeah, sure. I don't know what the question
Not
is,
trying to
but
make you
sure.
nervous. What would you say? Because I hear this and I see this a lot in Facebook groups, and I do not agree with it. But what would be your response as someone who is doing a business, and you're getting financial rewards from this business, as you should, because you're putting time and effort into this business. What would you say to practitioners who sort of have that attitude that, well, you know, I shouldn't really making money off of this type of stuff isn't, does that mean if you make money off of it, you're not really in it for the people, and, everyone has a right to care. So, we really should just not make money off it and almost make it available for free. I hear that type of nonsense a lot, in the SLP space. And I think there's like a guilt there. And there's money is a very taboo topic in our field. I know that is not the case in a lot of fields. But what would be your response to that? I'm very curious.
I think, like, you want to make sure that whatever you do is sustainable. Like, if you're like imagine you're a nurse, right? And you don't get paid because you just want to help. And you're like, no, I don't do this because I just want to help my patients. I would say that you're going to get home, you're going to be really tired and overworked. You're going to struggle to eat to be able to go help those people that you want to help, you're not going to have like your basic needs met. You're not going to flourish. You're not going to be able to, you know, Maslow's sort of triangle. You're not going to be able to get to those places where you can, you know, self-reflect and do all those kind of things, because you're not meeting those basic needs, and that's not a sustainable way of living. So I I know where they're coming from, but there is a place for charity, and you can do that. And I love charity, but you've got to actually split your resources and your time so that you know what you're doing. If you want to do charity, do it, but don't do work and call it charity, because then you're only going to limit yourself to do what you should be doing, and you're not going to achieve anywhere near as much as what you should do, because your basic needs are not being met because you're not being financially rewarded. So no, I don't agree with that approach, and I think you should a monetary reward should be part of it. Now, I think you should combine intentions though, so you can combine a passion and helping and all those kind of things. You can combine intentions. There's nothing wrong with that. But and pure motivation just for monetary gain can be kind of very selfish, and I don't like that either. But there is nothing wrong with being financially rewarded with putting effort, innovation into, and it could be anything. I mean, it could be anything. You could spend, you know, 2 or 3 years writing a book that could be really helpful, and it becomes a bestseller, to then allow you another platform to write another book. But if it wasn't a bestseller and you weren't getting financially rewarded for it, well, that's the end of it, and you're not going to be able to contribute any further to what you already did, when you might have more to contribute, simply because it's not sustainable. So I hope that makes sense.
I was like typing as you wrote that for like my notes for the show notes. I love that. A business, it has to be sustainable. And if it's not financially rewarding, it's not going to be sustainable. And then what you said at the end there was perfect. If you're limiting yourself, then, you know, maybe if you stop limiting yourself with those sort of limiting beliefs, maybe your business could grow and help more people.
Right.
Like for you, you know, Myo Spots was only, so when I took my Myo course, it was really difficult to get Myo Spots in the US. When I took my course a few years ago. But they brought them to the course like, hey, these are cool. Like, it's probably really hard to get them right now because they're only in Australia, but keep an eye out. And now they're much more readily available. But just think like, if you wouldn't have been financially rewarded with that business, it would have been much more difficult for you to expand to the US so that I can use them in my therapy room, because my 4-year-olds, they ain't going to use anything else. They're just not.
Yeah, that's so true.
Oh gosh, yeah. I love that. I love that perspective. And I can tell that you've put a lot of thought into not just that response, but even just into your business. And I want everyone else to take note of that that's listening. He talked about when you and your business partner, when you started your business, you guys had a vision. Like did you do like a vision statement or?
Yeah, I don't have it here with me. I haven't looked at it for a few months, but we definitely sat down and we try to update these goals from time to time. And the most important thing I thought was we have to have a vision statement, and we actually wrote it down. And we thought, like, if there were no limitations, if there was no barriers, what would the vision statement look like? And that's how we sort of, articulated it. And so that was really important for us, so that we knew we had some direction. Okay, this is where we're going. Here's where we head to. Now, I'm not saying that, like, nothing is guaranteed, and that's what life is all about. And I think a lot of people look at that and they say, okay, look, there's too much risk involved. I'd rather be safe. And by being safe, then you're not taking any risks, and you can't become innovative, and you can't do all this and that. And they can create those limitations. So, but you've got to actually be prepared to fail. I think that's really important. Like if you're not prepared to fall, if you're not prepared to have accidents, if you're not prepared to, not achieve what it is that you might want to achieve, then you might as well not start. So that in the back of the mind, okay, that can happen, but you know what? Let's go anyway. And so you kind of like, it's almost like risk management, to be honest, because you're going in there with the idea of knowing that all these things can happen, and you make peace with it before it actually happens. And if you made peace with it, if it does happen, you're okay with it. So,
Yeah. Cause I mean, with anything new, which I mean, again, like if you're kind of going from you've been a clinician your entire career to going, maybe stepping out and opening some sort of other business. Yeah, I love that. Just being, I type that down too. Being prepared to fail because you will at some point. Like it's going to happen. Like I'm sure you've got your stories of like times
so
where
many, so many times, hundreds of times, thousands maybe, all the time. Even now, it happens all the time. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be a business. I mean, it like as a clinician, like you want to grow as a clinician. And some clinicians I know in dentistry are too afraid to do certain procedures when I know they have the capacity to do it. I'm like, just do it. Just do it like you have to. You know how to do it. You've done it, like you've done the training for it. You just do it. And like, the worst case scenario is that if you're unable to get it done properly, then you're just going to refer it. But you have to take those risks because you're going to limit yourself further and further. And that's the same with everything. My daughter tells me like, I can't do this or I can't do that. And I say, well, that's true. She goes, what? So I said, well, if you say you can't, that's true. And if you say you can, that's true. Whatever you say is actually true because you're the one that's saying it. So you've just got to change. She goes, well, I can. I go, well, if you can, that's true too. And so it's just basically, I think, a mindset. And a lot of people limit themselves when people are so capable of doing so many things,
I think you need to write a book.
A book, yeah. I actually started one book, and I want, and it's actually, I'm not going to give the topic out, but it is about myofunctional therapy. But yeah, I have started one.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I had that premonition. I like knew what was going
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
so
Well, I don't want to take up all of your time. That was so insightful. And thank you for sharing that. But I do want to ask you before I release you, because I know it is late over there and I know that you have to get to
no,
sleep.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. So what are some sort of like next steps for you? Well, I have two closing questions. I'm going to be greedy. Sorry. What are you looking forward to? Like, what are the next steps you're looking toward with your business with Myo Spots?
Okay, so the next step we feel that's really important with Myospots is uh, research, and we want to encourage practitioners to do research to prove that it works. And we've already started. We have like a couple of people in Israel that have actually, without us even asking, have gone ahead and started to do some research on Myospots, especially when it comes to things like anterior open bite and things like that. And there's some really nice case studies to show that it does work. But what we'd really like to do is be able to show how it works, especially in the field of sleep. So sleep physiology and things like that. So we want to be able to show that, tongue exercise in the form of Myospots can improve your sleep apnea or hypoxia apnea index. And that to us would be really important because it's no longer just us saying that it works. It's academic. So that's probably our very next step with Myospots, the most the closest thing at the moment. Yeah.
Yes. And because everybody's always, especially in our, I'm sure your field is the same way. Everyone says, well, where's the research? Where's the research? And I think it's important to recognize like sometimes the research isn't there, not because the product or the approach doesn't work, but because just nobody's done it yet. And how much time and effort it takes into getting this done. But our clinical experience is very, very valid. And if you're saying that this is working in your clinical experience, I think that's something that's part of that evidence-based practice.
Yeah.
We learn this like evidence-based practice triangle in grad school. I don't know if y'all have that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really lucky because I'm, one of the founders of Myo Spots. I'm the very first person to use it. So I've got literally hundreds of cases where I've been able to, it's my first line of treatment really for the majority of my myofunctional therapy, and I've been able to show that it works. I've seen anterior open bite in 3 weeks start to close up. And I've seen adenoids. Like I had one child that was booked into an ENT surgeon to get their adenoids taken out, and just using Myo Spots for a few weeks, they cancelled their appointment with the ENT because they started to breathe properly. So I've seen it work firsthand from clinical experience, and what we hope is to be able to back that up with research. That'll be great.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you just so much for coming on and sharing your amazing insight. And I think having you on has just shown, and I think, I'm hoping that everyone in the audience is getting this. Like there's so many things that, we talk about on this show that, we talk about it in the realm of SLP, but there's so much of it that's just part of the human experience. And we all have doubts. We all have things that we need to overcome and whatever it is. But just like you had said earlier, just being prepared instead of fearing that failure, being prepared to fail, being okay with it. And also just learning like it's going to happen. And okay, what are you going to do now?
And you know who's best at that? Like toddlers. Toddlers fall over and over and over. Every time they want to get up, they'll fall. And when they're starting to walk, and then one day you'll see them balancing, but they're so happy. But before they started to walk, they'd fallen like a couple of hundred times. They'd fall in their bottom, they'd fall here, they'd fall there, but they just keep on persisting, and we lose that. You lose that resilience to failure. But that one time they succeed, they've forgotten all the failures. It's like it never happened.
Yes. And that word resilience, we've had an episode, I don't remember which one, but where we talked about resilience and how there's actually research out there to show that resiliency is a big part of happiness and just being, warding off things like depression and anxiety and things like that, and being resilient through the things that life throws at you, through whatever it is, whether it's personal, family, or business. That resiliency is really, really important. So I love that you brought that word up.
100%.
So one last thing, tell us, we've been talking about Myo Spots and all of the amazing things that you guys are doing. So can you tell all the listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, if you just go to our website, myospots.com, so myospots.com, and also on Instagram and Facebook, and even if you type in on YouTube, you'll see like a few videos about Myospots. But you can always shoot me a message because they eventually come to me through the Instagram, or you can just go to info@myospots.com and send us a message, and happy to answer any questions. And
perfect. Thank you so much, Shehab. I said it correctly, right?
Yes,
Shehab?
100%. Thanks.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, I'm so
yes,
good.
You got it.
I always joke, I'm a speech therapist, but I need speech therapy. I really do. But thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute delight. And I cannot wait to see what you're going to be doing with Myo Spots in the future, and all of the information about Myo Spots and Shehab, it's going to be in the show notes so that you guys can go and find him, go look it up. And if you have any myofunctional therapy questions, anything like that, please feel free to DM me, or I'm sure Shehab would be totally open if you guys have questions about the products or anything like that.
Thanks, Danni. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. See you.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to hear more no fluff, getting the dang thing done stuff from myself and other real life SLPs, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or pledge a small amount on patreon.com/SpeechGoods. If you found this content valuable, please share it with others so we can get this message out there. And if you haven't already, join us on Instagram. Handle is @SpeechGoods. See you there.